The digital clock on the dashboard blinked 10:47 p.m. as Sarah Mitchell guided the silver Honda Accord down Interstate 40, the highway cutting through the darkness of rural Tennessee like a ribbon of asphalt under the star-scattered sky. Her own Toyota had finally given up that morning, transmission blown, mechanic shaking his head with that look that meant thousands of dollars she didn't have. When Marcus Webb from the warehouse offered his car for the weekend, it felt like a lifeline. "Just bring it back Sunday," he'd said with that easy smile of his. "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah adjusted the air conditioning, trying to shake off the unease that had been gnawing at her since she left Nashville. Something about Marcus had seemed off when she picked up the keys. His hands had trembled slightly, and he'd watched her pull away with an expression she couldn't quite read. Worry? Guilt? She dismissed it as paranoia. Marcus was always a little anxious. It was just his way. The Memphis skyline was still 40 minutes away where she was supposed to pick up Marcus's cousin from the bus station. A simple favor. An easy drive. Sarah turned up the radio, letting a country song fill the silence, when suddenly her rearview mirror exploded with blue and red lights. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "No, no, no," she whispered, checking her speedometer. 65 in a 70 zone. She'd been careful, hadn't she? Sarah's hands went clammy as she flipped on her turn signal and guided the Honda onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under the tires as she came to a stop, her mind racing. License and registration. Where was the registration? This wasn't her car. Would that be a problem? Through her side mirror, she watched a Tennessee state trooper emerge from the patrol car, his silhouette backlit by the flashing lights. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the methodical pace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. But there was something else. Another shape moved in the darkness behind him, low to the ground, four-legged, alert. A dog. Sarah's breath caught as she rolled down her window, the humid night air rushing in. The officer's flashlight beam hit her face, and she squinted against the brightness. "Evening, ma'am. License and registration, please." His voice was flat, professional, devoid of warmth. His name tag read BRENNAN. "Of course, officer. This isn't my car. I borrowed it from a friend. My car broke down," and Sarah fumbled through the glove compartment, her fingers shaking. Why was she so nervous? She hadn't done anything wrong. People got pulled over all the time. "Just the documents, ma'am." She found the registration buried under fast food napkins and handed it over with her license. Officer Brennan studied them with his flashlight, his eyes moving between her face and the documents. Behind him, the German Shepherd sat perfectly still, its dark eyes fixed on the Honda with unsettling intensity. "Your taillight is out. Left side," Brennan said. "You aware of that?" "No, sir. Like I said, it's not mine." "Step out of the vehicle, please." Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. "Why? It's just a taillight, right? I can get it fixed." "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. Step out of the vehicle." The authority in his voice left no room for argument. Sarah's hands trembled as she unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. The August night wrapped around her like a warm, suffocating blanket. She stood beside the car, her legs feeling weak, watching as Officer Brennan walked to his patrol vehicle and returned with the German Shepherd on a leash. "This is Duke," Brennan said, his tone shifting slightly, almost conversational. "He's going to walk around your vehicle. Just stand right there and don't move." "Wait, what? Why do you need a drug dog?" I don't." Panic crept into Sarah's voice. "This couldn't be happening, not for a broken taillight." "Standard procedure, ma'am. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." But Sarah had everything to worry about now, even though she'd done nothing wrong. She watched, frozen in place, as Duke began his work. The dog moved with mechanical precision, his nose working along the car's perimeter. He sniffed the doors, the wheel wells, the front bumper. Sarah's mind raced. Marcus's car. What if he had drugs in here? What if someone else had used this car? She barely knew Marcus. They worked together at the distribution warehouse. exchanged small talk during lunch breaks, but she didn't know his life, his friends, his history. Duke circled to the trunk. The dog paused, his nose working faster. Then, in one fluid motion, Duke sat down directly beside the trunk, his tail still, his posture rigid. Sarah's world tilted. "We have a positive alert," Brennan said into his radio, his voice crackling through the night. "Requesting backup and permission to search." "No," Sarah breathed. "No, there's nothing in there. I don't even know what's in there. This isn't my car." But Brennan wasn't listening. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived, their lights turning the highway shoulder into a strobing nightmare of red and blue. Officers moved with practiced efficiency. Sarah was asked to stand beside one of the patrol cars while they searched. She felt like she was watching it happen to someone else, a character in a movie, not her real life. "Officer, please," she called out, her voice breaking. "I borrowed this car from a friend, Marcus Webb. You can call him. I don't know what's in the trunk. I've never even opened it." One of the officers popped the trunk with the key. Sarah couldn't see what they were doing, but she heard their low voices, urgent and animated. Then Officer Brennan walked toward her, his face grave, carrying a black duffel bag that looked heavy. He unzipped it under the glare of the flashlights. Sarah's knees nearly gave out. Inside the bag, wrapped in clear plastic, were dozens of rectangular packages of white crystalline substance. Even in the darkness, even from several feet away, Sarah knew what she was looking at. She'd seen enough crime shows, enough news reports. "Methamphetamine." "That's not mine," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper, then louder, desperate. "That's not mine. I don't know how that got there. Marcus. It must be Marcus's. He gave me the car. I didn't know. Please, you have to believe me." But Officer Brennan was already reading her rights, the words washing over her like cold water. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The handcuffs were cold and tight around her wrists. Sarah's mind screamed at her to say something, do something, make them understand. But what could she say? The drugs were in a car she was driving. Duke had alerted. The evidence was right there in that black duffel bag. As they loaded her into the back of the patrol car, Sarah caught a glimpse of Duke sitting beside his handler, tongue lolling out, waiting for his reward treat. The dog had done his job. And Sarah Mitchell's life had just fallen apart. The Davidson County Jail smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Sarah sat on the edge of a thin mattress in a cell she shared with 3 other women, staring at the cinder block wall that had become her entire world. 72 hours had passed since her arrest, and each hour felt like a lifetime. The fluorescent lights never truly went off, just dimmed to a sickly yellow glow that made sleep nearly impossible. When she did manage to drift off, she dreamed of blue lights and that moment when the trunk opened, playing on an endless, torturous loop. Her first call from the jail phone had been to Marcus, straight to voicemail. The second call, an hour later, voicemail again. By the third attempt, a robotic voice informed her that the number was no longer in service. Sarah had stared at the phone in disbelief, her hand shaking so badly she'd nearly dropped the receiver. He'd disconnected his phone. Marcus Webb had vanished. "Mitchell, your attorney's here," the guard's voice echoed down the cell block, jolting Sarah from her thoughts. She stood on unsteady legs, her county-issued orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her frame. She'd barely eaten since the arrest. The food tasted like cardboard, and her stomach churned with constant anxiety. The consultation room was small and airless, divided by a scratched plexiglass partition. Linda Chen sat on the other side, her laptop open, files scattered across the metal table. She was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and gray streaking through her black hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. Court-appointed attorneys had a reputation for being overworked and disinterested, but Linda's expression was focused, intent. "Sarah," Linda said, her voice muffled through the partition, "we need to talk about Marcus Webb." "Did you find him?" Sarah pressed her hands against the plexiglass, hope flaring in her chest. Did you talk to him? He can explain. He's gone. Linda cut her off, her tone flat. Completely off the grid. His apartment was cleared out. His landlord says he left 3 days ago, the same day you were arrested. Took everything. Didn't give notice, forfeited his security deposit. His job at the warehouse says he never came back after his shift the day before your arrest. No forwarding address, no family contacts they're aware of. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. Sarah felt her eyes burn with tears. No, that can't be right. He has a cousin in Memphis, that's why I was driving there, to pick up his cousin from the bus station. Linda pulled out a notepad, flipping through pages covered in dense handwriting. I checked. No one by the name Marcus gave you arrived at the Memphis bus station that night. In fact, no one with that name had a ticket to Memphis at all that week. I've verified with Greyhound, Megabus, every carrier I could find. The room tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of the metal stool to steady herself. But he told me his cousin was stranded, needed a ride. That's the only reason I agreed to drive. I was doing him a favor. Sarah, listen to me carefully. Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping. Marcus set you up. The trip to Memphis was a lie. The broken-down cousin was a lie. He needed someone to transport those drugs, and he chose you because you're clean. No criminal record, no connection to the drug trade, just a single mother working a warehouse job trying to make ends meet. You were the perfect mule. No, Sarah shook her head violently, denial flooding through her. We were friends. We ate lunch together. He knew about my daughter, about my mom. He wouldn't. How well did you actually know him? Linda interrupted. Did you ever meet his friends, go to his apartment, know where he was from originally? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. The truth settled over her like a weight. She didn't know Marcus. Not really. They'd worked together for 8 months, shared surface-level conversations about weather and weekend plans, but she couldn't name a single real friend of his. Couldn't remember him ever mentioning family beyond the fictional cousin. He'd been friendly but distant, pleasant but never personal. He played you, Linda said, not unkindly. And now you're holding the bag, literally. But I didn't know, Sarah's voice cracked. I had no idea those drugs were in the car. Doesn't that matter? Isn't there something called intent or? Of course it matters, but proving what you didn't know is nearly impossible. Linda pulled out a manila folder, spreading photographs across her side of the table. Sarah recognized them immediately, crime scene photos from the traffic stop, the black duffel bag, the packages of methamphetamine, her own stunned face in the patrol car's backlash camera footage. The prosecution's case is straightforward. You were driving a vehicle containing 15 pounds of methamphetamine. That's not user quantity, that's trafficking weight. Federal charges. The drug dog alerted, which gives the search legal standing. Your fingerprints are on the steering wheel, the door handles, the keys. You were in complete control of the vehicle and its contents. But Marcus isn't here, Linda said sharply. And without him, you have no corroboration for your story. It's your word against physical evidence. The prosecution will argue that you and Marcus were partners, that he's disappeared because he knew you'd try to blame him, that your borrowed car story is a convenient fiction. Sarah felt tears spilling down her cheeks. What about my mom, my daughter? Emma's only 6 years old, she needs me. Linda's expression softened slightly. Your mother tried to post bail. She was willing to take a second mortgage on her house, but the judge denied bail. Given the quantity of drugs and the severity of the charges, he deemed you a flight risk. I would never run. I have a daughter here. The judge sees 15 pounds of meth and thinks you have the resources and motivation to disappear, just like Marcus did. Linda closed her laptop with a decisive click. Sarah, I need you to understand something. Right now, the evidence against you is overwhelming. We're looking at 15 to 25 years in federal prison if we go to trial and lose. The prosecutor, Daniel Shaw, has offered a plea deal, 10 years if you cooperate and name your supplier network. I don't have a supplier network. I'm not a drug dealer." "I believe you," Linda said quietly. "But belief doesn't win trials. Evidence does. And right now, all the evidence points to you." Sarah pressed her forehead against the cold plexiglass, her whole body shaking. This couldn't be happening. She was a warehouse worker, a mother, someone who recycled and paid her taxes and helped her elderly neighbor carry groceries. She'd never even smoked marijuana. And now she was facing decades in prison for drugs she didn't know existed. "There has to be something," Sarah whispered. "Some way to prove I didn't know." Linda was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs spread before her. "There might be," she said slowly, "but it's a long shot. I've been looking at the K9 alert, at Duke's history. Something's not adding up with that dog's track record." "What do you mean?" "I mean Duke might not be as reliable as Officer Brennan claims." Linda tapped one of the photos, the image of the German Shepherd sitting beside the Honda's trunk. "And if we can prove that, if we can show the alert was false or questionable, then maybe we can suppress the evidence from the search. Without that evidence, there's no case." For the first time in 3 days, Sarah felt a spark of something other than despair. It was small, fragile, but it was there. "Hope. What do we do?" she asked. Linda gathered her files, her jaw set with determination. "We investigate Duke. Every alert he's ever made, every search he's conducted. If that dog has a pattern of false alerts, we expose it. It's not much, but it's all we've got." As Sarah was led back to her cell, her mind churned. Marcus was gone, vanished like smoke. The drugs were real. The charges were real. But maybe, just maybe, the dog that had started this nightmare could also be the key to ending it. She just had to survive long enough to find out. Linda Chen's office was a testament to organized chaos. Case files towered in precarious stacks on every available surface. Yellow Post-it notes covered her computer monitor like a paper quilt, and the coffee maker in the corner had been running on overdrive for the past week. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Linda was still awake, her eyes burning as she scrolled through yet another public records request response. This was the part of criminal defense work that never made it into television dramas. The endless, tedious digging through documents, searching for the one needle in a haystack that could save a client's life. Most cases didn't have dramatic courtroom revelations or surprise witnesses. Most cases were won or lost in moments like this, alone in a dim office at 3 in the morning, hunting for truth in spreadsheets and incident reports. Linda took another sip of cold coffee and clicked on the file labeled K9 Duke Activity LOGS 2018-2020. She'd submitted a Freedom of Information Act request 2 weeks ago, demanding all records related to Duke's deployment history. The Davidson County Sheriff's Department had dragged their feet, claiming the documents required extensive review for officer safety reasons, but Linda had threatened a court order. The files had arrived that afternoon, over 300 pages of incident reports, training certifications, and deployment logs. The first few hours of review had been discouraging. Duke's training certifications were impeccable. He'd completed an intensive 12-week program at a facility in Kentucky, passed all his evaluations with flying colors, and maintained his certification through regular refresher courses. On paper, Duke was an exemplary police dog. But Linda wasn't interested in what looked good on paper. She was interested in Duke's real-world performance. She'd created a spreadsheet painstakingly entering data from every traffic stop where Duke had been deployed over the past 18 months. Each row represented an alert, a moment when Duke had signaled the presence of drugs. Each column tracked the outcome. Was contraband found? What type? How much? What was the driver's demographic information? Time of day? Location? As the spreadsheet grew, a pattern began to emerge that made Linda's pulse quicken. 47 total alerts. Only 9 had resulted in actual drug discoveries. Linda sat back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. That was a 19.1% success rate. She'd spent the previous day researching K-9 accuracy standards, reading academic studies and court cases. The national average for certified drug detection dogs was between 60–70%. Some elite dogs achieved 80–85% accuracy. Duke wasn't just below average, he was catastrophically unreliable. But there was more. Linda leaned forward, studying the demographic breakdown. Of Duke's 47 alerts, 32 had been on vehicles driven by Black or Hispanic drivers. Sarah was white, but she'd been driving at night on a route known for drug trafficking. The pattern suggested something troubling. Duke wasn't detecting drugs. He was providing probable cause for searches that Officer Tom Brennan wanted to conduct. Linda opened another file, Brennan's personnel record, obtained through a separate public records request and some creative networking with a paralegal who owed her a favor. What she found made her stomach turn. 3 civil rights complaints filed against Brennan in the past 5 years, all alleging racial profiling and improper searches. None had resulted in disciplinary action. 2 had been settled quietly by the county for undisclosed amounts, taxpayer money used to make problems disappear. 1 was still pending. She clicked through to the details of the settled cases. In 2017, Brennan had stopped a Black minister driving home from church, claimed Duke alerted, searched the vehicle for 40 minutes and found nothing. The minister's teenage daughter had been in the car, traumatized by watching her father handcuffed on the highway shoulder. Settlement: $75,000. In 2019, Brennan stopped a Hispanic family returning from vacation. Duke alerted. The family's van was torn apart, seats removed, panels pried off, luggage emptied onto the highway. Nothing found. The parents' complaints of rough treatment and their children's terror went nowhere until they hired an attorney. Settlement: $50,000. Linda's jaw clenched. This wasn't about a poorly trained dog. This was about a police officer using his K-9 as a tool to justify searches that would otherwise be unconstitutional. Duke wasn't the problem, Brennan was. She pulled up video footage from Sarah's traffic stop, which she'd obtained during discovery. Watching it for the dozenth time, Linda now saw details she'd missed before. As Brennan walked Duke around the Honda, his body language changed when he approached the trunk. His shoulders tensed. His grip on the leash tightened. His pace slowed. And Duke responded. Linda paused the video, her heart racing. She'd read about this phenomenon in her research, handler cueing. Police dogs were trained to be exquisitely attuned to their handler's body language. They wanted to please, to earn rewards. When a handler unconsciously signaled that they expected to find something, the dog would alert, not because they smelled drugs, but because they sensed their handler's anticipation. She needed an expert, someone who could testify about handler cueing, about false alert patterns, about K-9 reliability. Linda opened her laptop's browser and began searching for canine behavior specialists who'd served as expert witnesses in criminal cases. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over Nashville, Linda had her expert, Dr. Rachel Kim, a canine behaviorist from the University of California with an impressive CV and extensive courtroom experience. She'd testified in 12 cases involving questionable K-9 alerts, and her analysis had led to evidence suppression in 8 of them. Linda drafted an email attaching Duke's activity logs and the video footage from Sarah's stop. She explained the case, the stakes, and what she needed. Her finger hovered over the send button. This was their shot, probably their only shot. If Dr. Kim agreed to review the case and found nothing problematic, they were done. If she never responded, they were done. Linda clicked send. She sat back, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Through her office window, Nashville was waking up. Traffic began to hum on the streets below. Somewhere across town, Sarah was waking up in a jail cell, counting down the days until a trial that could end her life as she knew it. Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, not expecting anything important. It was barely 6 a.m. but the notification made her sit up straight. An email from Dr. Rachel Kim. Subject line, "I've seen this pattern before." Linda's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Dr. Kim had written, "I reviewed your materials. Duke's alert pattern is consistent with systematic handler cueing. The demographic skew is particularly telling. The video footage shows classic signs. Watch Brennan's body language from 2:34 to 2:41. I've testified in 3 cases with similar patterns. I can help. When's the trial?" Linda felt tears prick her eyes, from exhaustion, from relief, from the fierce protectiveness she developed for Sarah over the past weeks. This wasn't over. They had a fighting chance. She immediately began drafting a motion to suppress evidence based on Duke's unreliability and potential handler cueing. She knew it was a long shot. Judges were notoriously deferential to police canines, viewing them as infallible. But she had statistics now. Expert testimony. A pattern of false alerts that couldn't be ignored. At 9 a.m., Linda filed the motion with the court. At 10 a.m., she drove to the jail to update Sarah. When she explained what she'd found, Duke's dismal track record, Brennan's history, Dr. Kim's willingness to testify, Sarah cried for the first time since their initial meeting. "Does this mean I could go home?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with hope and fear. Linda chose her words carefully. "It means we have ammunition. Judge Morrison will review our motion. If she grants it and suppresses the evidence, the prosecution's case falls apart. But Linda," she paused, meeting Sarah's eyes through the plexiglass. "Judge Morrison is tough. She's former prosecution, very law and order. Getting her to rule against a police K-9 will be an uphill battle." 2 weeks later, they sat in Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom for the suppression hearing. Linda presented Duke's statistics, showed the video footage, and laid out her argument methodically. The prosecution fought back hard, bringing Duke's trainer to testify about his excellent certification and training. Judge Morrison listened impassively, her face giving nothing away. When she finally spoke, her words crushed them. "Motion denied. Duke is a certified police dog with proper training. The defense's statistical analysis, while interesting, doesn't overcome that certification. We proceed to trial." Linda felt Sarah deflate beside her, but as they left the courtroom, Linda's mind was already racing ahead. They'd lost this battle, but the war wasn't over. If they couldn't suppress the evidence, they'd have to discredit it at trial. And Linda Chen was just getting started. February 12, 2020 arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of fall spring that teased Middle Tennessee before winter's inevitable return. Sarah Mitchell sat at the defense table in courtroom 3A, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She wore a borrowed navy blue blazer over a white blouse. Linda had insisted on professional attire, though nothing could hide the gauntness in Sarah's face or the dark circles under her eyes. 5 months in county jail had hollowed her out, physically and emotionally. The courtroom was packed. Sarah's mother, Patricia, sat in the front row directly behind the defense table, her Bible clutched in her hands like a shield. Next to her was Sarah's younger sister, Jennifer, who'd driven up from Atlanta. On the prosecution's side, reporters filled the benches, their notebooks ready. A trafficking case involving a seemingly ordinary single mother had drawn media attention. It fit too neatly into narratives about the opioid epidemic, about how anyone could be caught up in the drug trade. Sarah forced herself to look at the jury box, 12 faces that held her future in their hands, 7 women, 5 men, a mix of ages and races, all wearing the carefully neutral expressions of people trying not to prejudge. But Sarah caught the way some of them looked at her, that flicker of suspicion, that subtle lean away, as if criminality might be contagious. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed, the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison swept into the courtroom, her black robe billowing behind her. She was in her early 60s, with steel-gray hair cut short and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her reputation preceded her, former federal prosecutor for 15 years before ascending to the bench. She was known for running a tight courtroom and having little patience for theatrics or time wasting. "Be seated," Morrison said, settling into her chair. "We're here for the trial of the state of Tennessee versus Sarah Jean Mitchell. Is the prosecution ready?" Daniel Shaw stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. He was everything a prosecutor should look like: mid-40s, perfectly tailored charcoal suit, American flag pin on his lapel, and the confident bearing of someone who'd won far more cases than he'd lost. His smile was warm, but his eyes were cold calculation. "Ready, Your Honor." "Defense." Linda stood, looking small next to Shaw's commanding presence. Her suit was off the rack, her shoes practical rather than stylish, but her spine was straight. "Ready, Your Honor." "Then let's proceed with opening statements, Mr. Shaw." Shaw approached the jury box with the casual confidence of someone walking into his own living room. He made eye contact with each juror, establishing connection, building trust. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service today. What I'm about to present to you is not a complicated case. In fact, it's remarkably simple." He paused, letting that sink in. On the night of August 17, 2019, the defendant, Sarah Mitchell, was pulled over on Interstate 40 for a traffic violation. She was driving a silver Honda Accord. When a certified police drug detection dog alerted to the presence of narcotics in that vehicle, officers conducted a lawful search. Shaw clicked a remote, and the courtroom screen flickered to life with a photo of the black duffel bag, unzipped to reveal its contents. Several jurors leaned forward. What they found was this: 15 pounds of methamphetamine, not a user's amount, not a small-time dealer's supply. 15 pounds, with a street value of approximately $500,000. That's $500,000 worth of poison that destroys families, devastates communities, and kills people. Sarah felt her mother's hand squeeze her shoulder from behind. "Now the defense will tell you a story," Shaw continued, his tone shifting to something almost sympathetic. "They'll say that Ms. Mitchell didn't know about the drugs, that she innocently borrowed this car from a friend, that she's a victim of circumstance." He paused, shaking his head slowly. "But ladies and gentlemen, the evidence tells a different story, a true story." Shaw walked back to the prosecution table and picked up a file. The defendant was in sole possession and control of this vehicle. Her fingerprints were on the steering wheel, the door handles, the keys. She was the driver. She was the one in command of that vehicle and everything in it. He clicked to the next slide, the dashcam footage, frozen at the moment Duke sat beside the trunk. You will hear testimony from Officer Tom Brennan and his K-9 partner, Duke. Duke is a certified drug detection dog, trained at one of the finest facilities in the country. Duke has years of experience and an impeccable track record. When Duke alerted to this vehicle, he was doing exactly what he was trained to do, detecting the presence of illegal narcotics. Shaw clicked again. Now the screen showed Sarah's face from the bodycam footage, her eyes wide with what Shaw characterized as the look of someone who knows they've been caught. You'll see the defendant's reaction when the drugs were discovered. You'll hear her immediately try to blame someone else, a mysterious friend named Marcus Webb who conveniently cannot be found, a friend who allegedly owned the car but has vanished without a trace. Shaw's voice dripped with skepticism. How convenient. He approached the jury box again, his expression grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, drug trafficking organizations rely on people exactly like the defendant. They look for individuals with clean records, people who appear ordinary and trustworthy, people who can move large quantities of drugs without raising suspicion. The defendant was a perfect courier, a single mother, a warehouse worker, someone with no criminal history, someone who could blend in." Sarah wanted to scream, to stand up and shout that it wasn't true, but Linda's hand on her arm kept her still. "Over the course of this trial, you will hear from multiple witnesses," Shaw continued. You'll hear from Officer Brennan about the traffic stop and Duke's alert. You'll hear from the officers who discovered the drugs. You'll hear from the forensic chemist who tested the substance and confirmed it was methamphetamine, 15 pounds of it. You'll see the dashcam footage, the bodycam footage, the photographic evidence. And when you've heard all of that, I'm confident you'll reach the only reasonable conclusion: that Sarah Mitchell knowingly and intentionally transported 15 pounds of methamphetamine on Interstate 40 on August 17, 2019. Shaw returned to his seat and Sarah noticed several jurors nodding slightly. He'd done his job, planted the seed of her guilt, made it seem simple and obvious. "Ms. Chen," Judge Morrison gestured to Linda. Linda stood, and for a moment Sarah felt a flash of fear. Linda looked so small, so outmatched against Shaw's polished performance. But when Linda spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "Members of the jury, my client is innocent. Not guilty, but innocent. There is a profound difference." Linda stepped away from the defense table, her approach to the jury more intimate, less theatrical than Shaw's. "Mr. Shaw told you this case is simple, but the truth is rarely simple. Yes, drugs were found in a car Sarah Mitchell was driving. That fact is not in dispute, but the critical question, the only question that matters, is this: did Sarah Mitchell know those drugs were there?" Linda pulled up her own slide, a photo of Sarah with her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, both smiling at a birthday party. Sarah Mitchell is a single mother. She works 2 jobs to provide for her daughter. She has no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. She doesn't use drugs, doesn't sell drugs, has no connection to any drug trafficking organization. She is exactly what she appears to be, an ordinary woman trying to make ends meet. Linda's voice hardened, and she was used, manipulated by someone she thought was a friend. Marcus Webb deliberately chose Sarah because she was innocent, because she would never suspect what she was being asked to transport. He knew that if she got caught, she would be the one facing these charges while he disappeared. Linda clicked to a timeline. You will see that Marcus Webb vanished the same day Sarah was arrested. His apartment was cleared out. His phone was disconnected. He left no forwarding address. These are not the actions of an innocent man. They're the actions of someone who knew exactly what he'd done and was escaping the consequences. Sarah watched the jury, trying to gauge their reactions. A few looked thoughtful, but most remained impassive. "The prosecution will show you Duke's alert and claim it proves Sarah's guilt," Linda continued. "But we will show you that Duke is far from infallible. In fact, Duke has a troubling history of false alerts that the prosecution doesn't want you to know about. We will present expert testimony about how police dogs can be influenced by their handlers, how they can alert even when no drugs are present." Shaw started to rise, likely to object, but Judge Morrison waved him down. "Save it for when evidence is presented, Mr. Shaw." Linda concluded simply, "Sarah Mitchell made a mistake. She trusted the wrong person, but trust is not a crime. Being manipulated is not a crime. And we will prove that Sarah had no knowledge, no intent, and no involvement in drug trafficking. Thank you." As Linda sat down, Sarah whispered, "Did that help?" Linda's expression was grim. "We'll see." Shaw made a strong opening. "Now we have to dismantle his case piece by piece." Judge Morrison checked her watch. "We'll take a 15-minute recess, then the prosecution may call its first witness." Sarah knew who that would be: Officer Tom Brennan and his K-9 partner, Duke. The nightmare was just beginning. The trial had dragged on for 3 brutal days. Officer Brennan had testified with clinical precision about Duke's training and the traffic stop. The forensic chemist had confirmed the substance was methamphetamine of high purity. Crime scene technicians had walked the jury through photographs and chain-of-custody procedures. Each witness built another brick in the wall trapping Sarah. Linda's cross-examinations had been sharp, but seemed to barely dent the prosecution's narrative. She'd gotten Brennan to admit Duke had made a few false alerts in the past, but he'd quickly deflected, insisting every dog occasionally made mistakes and that Duke's overall record was excellent. The jury had listened politely but showed little reaction. Now, on the morning of day 4, Sarah sat at the defense table feeling hope slipping away like sand through her fingers. Her mother's face in the gallery had grown more haggard each day. Emma had been asking when Mommy was coming home. Judge Morrison called the court to order. "Ms. Chen, are you ready to present the defense's case?" Linda stood, and Sarah noticed something different in her attorney's posture, a coiled tension, like a spring about to release. "Your Honor, before we begin with witnesses, the defense has an unusual request." Shaw looked up sharply from his notes, his expression wary. "Go ahead, Ms. Chen," Morrison said. Linda took a breath. "Your Honor, this entire case hinges on the reliability of K9 Duke's alert on the night of August 17th. The prosecution has repeatedly assured this jury that Duke is a highly trained, certified, and reliable drug detection dog. We believe the jury deserves to see Duke's capabilities for themselves. The defense requests that K9 Duke be brought into this courtroom for a controlled demonstration of his detection abilities." The courtroom erupted. Reporters leaned forward, whispering frantically. Shaw shot to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, this is nothing but a publicity stunt. K9 demonstrations are not standard courtroom procedure. The defense is trying to turn this trial into a circus." "Your Honor," Linda countered, her voice steady, "the prosecution has spent 3 days telling this jury how reliable Duke is. If Duke is as accurate as they claim, they should have no objection to proving it. The jury has seen videos and heard testimony, but they deserve to see firsthand whether Duke can reliably detect narcotics under controlled conditions." Judge Morrison removed her glasses, cleaning them slowly while the courtroom held its breath. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the gamble Linda had warned her about. If Morrison denied the request, they had little else to fight with. "This is highly irregular," Morrison finally said. She looked at Shaw. "Mr. Shaw, does the state object to demonstrating its own evidence?" Shaw's jaw clenched. He was trapped. Objecting too strongly would make it seem like the prosecution lacked confidence in Duke. "Your Honor, we don't object to Duke's capabilities being demonstrated, but this should be done properly, not as courtroom theater." "Then you won't mind if we make it properly controlled," Morrison said. She turned to Linda. "Ms. Chen, what exactly are you proposing?" Linda had prepared for this moment. 3 identical boxes, Your Honor. One will contain a small quantity of marijuana that we can obtain from the court's evidence locker, legally seized and properly documented. The other 2 boxes will be empty. The boxes will be placed in the courtroom, and Officer Brennan will walk Duke past them as he would during a normal search. If Duke is as reliable as claimed, he should alert to the box containing drugs and only that box. Morrison considered this. "The demonstration will be conducted under my supervision. Officer Brennan will not know which box contains the contraband. Mr. Shaw, you'll oversee the placement of the evidence to ensure fairness. Any objections?" Shaw looked like he wanted to object strenuously, but he could see the trap. "No objections, Your Honor." "Then we'll reconvene in 1 hour to set up." The next hour was a blur of activity. 3 cardboard boxes, identical in size and appearance, were placed at intervals along the courtroom's left wall. Sarah watched through the defense table as Shaw himself, wearing gloves, placed a small evidence bag containing marijuana into one of the boxes under Judge Morrison's watchful eye. The box was sealed. The boxes were shuffled by the bailiff while Shaw turned away. No one, not Shaw, not Linda, not the jury, knew which box now contained the drugs. When court resumed, the gallery was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about the unusual demonstration, and every available seat was filled. Extra bailiffs had been called in to manage the crowd. Officer Brennan entered with Duke on a tight leash. The German Shepherd looked alert and professional, his ears forward, his dark eyes scanning the room. Brennan's face was stony, but Sarah noticed a slight tightness around his eyes. He was nervous. "Officer Brennan," Judge Morrison instructed, You'll walk Duke past these 3 boxes. Take your time. Conduct the exercise exactly as you would in the field. The court will observe." Brennan nodded curtly. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom fell silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel her mother's prayer whispered behind her. 12 jurors leaned forward in their seats. This was it, the moment that could change everything. Brennan began walking Duke along the wall, starting away from the boxes to let the dog settle into work mode. Duke's nose worked the air, his body language focused and professional. They approached the first box. Duke sniffed it thoroughly, his nose running along the edges, the top, the sides. 15 seconds, 20. Then he moved on without alerting. Sarah's fingernails dug into her palms. The second box. Duke's routine was the same, methodical, careful sniffing. His tail remained level, no sit, no alert signal. He moved to the third box. This time Duke's sniffing seemed more intense. His nose worked faster. Sarah saw Brennan's body tense slightly, his grip on the leash adjusting. Was this it? Was this the box with the drugs? But Duke didn't sit. After 30 seconds of investigation, he lifted his head and looked at Brennan, almost confused. Brennan's expression flickered with something: frustration, surprise. He walked Duke back past the boxes again, slower this time. Nothing. Duke showed no interest in any of the 3 boxes. The courtroom began to murmur. Shaw's face had gone pale, but then something unexpected happened. Duke suddenly pulled toward the jury box, his nose high, tracking a scent. Brennan tried to redirect him, but Duke was insistent, his training overriding the handler's commands. He walked directly to the jury box and, to everyone's shock, sat down firmly next to Juror 7's seat. The alert signal. The juror, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Holmes, turned bright red. Her hand flew to her purse sitting at her feet. The courtroom exploded in whispers. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order! Ms. Holmes, is there something in your purse we should know about?" Patricia Holmes looked mortified. Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I have CBD oil in my purse. For my anxiety, it's legal. I bought it at the health food store. I didn't think. I forgot it was in there." Linda was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, this is exactly what the defense has been trying to demonstrate. Duke didn't alert to the marijuana in one of those boxes, marijuana that he's specifically trained to detect. Instead, he alerted to legal CBD oil. He cannot distinguish between legal and illegal substances, and more importantly," she turned to face the jury, "this demonstrates that Duke responds to his handler's cues and expectations rather than actual drug scent." Shaw stood, his voice tight. "Your Honor, Duke was distracted by an unexpected scent source. This doesn't." "Doesn't what, Mr. Shaw?" Linda interrupted. "Doesn't prove that Duke is unreliable. We just watched him fail to identify actual marijuana while alerting to a legal substance. This is exactly what happened to my client. Duke alerted to Sarah's vehicle not because drugs were present, but because Officer Brennan expected to find drugs." Judge Morrison held up her hand. "We'll discuss the implications during arguments. Officer Brennan, you're dismissed. Ms. Holmes, remove that purse from the courtroom during the next break." As Brennan led Duke out, the dog looked confused, still seeking his reward treat. Sarah watched the jury's faces. Several looked troubled. One older man was shaking his head slowly. A younger woman had her hand over her mouth in apparent shock. Linda leaned close to Sarah. "This isn't over, but we just gave them reasonable doubt." For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she could breathe. The case wasn't won, not yet. But Duke, the prosecution's star witness, had just failed spectacularly in front of the jury. And everyone in that courtroom had seen it happen. The courtroom still buzzed with residual energy from Duke's failed demonstration as Judge Morrison called the afternoon session to order. Sarah noticed how the jury looked different now, more alert, more engaged, some openly skeptical as they glanced toward the prosecution table. Shaw sat rigid, his jaw clenched so tight Sarah could see the muscle twitching. He'd spent the lunch recess in heated conversation with his team, their voices carrying through the courthouse hallway. Linda stood, smoothing her suit jacket. The defense calls Dr. Rachel Kim to the stand. A woman in her early 50s entered the courtroom, carrying herself with quiet authority. Dr. Kim wore a simple gray pantsuit and minimal jewelry, her black hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had the kind of face that commanded attention through intelligence rather than theatrics, sharp eyes behind frameless glasses, a professional demeanor that immediately signaled credibility. After being sworn in, Dr. Kim settled into the witness chair. Linda approached with a warm smile that put the expert at ease while establishing rapport for the jury. "Dr. Kim, could you please tell the jury about your professional background?" Dr. Kim's voice was clear and measured, the tone of someone used to explaining complex concepts to laypeople. "I'm a professor of animal behavioral science at the University of California, Davis. I've been studying canine behavior for 23 years, with a specific focus on working dogs, police canines, search and rescue dogs, service animals. I've published over 40 peer-reviewed articles on canine cognition and behavior." "Have you ever testified in court before?" "Yes, I've served as an expert witness in 17 cases involving police canine detection work, 14 in criminal cases, 3 in civil rights litigation." Linda pulled up Dr. Kim's CV on the courtroom screen. It was impressive: pages of publications, speaking engagements, research grants, and professional accolades. Shaw would have a hard time attacking her credentials. "Dr. Kim, you've reviewed the materials in this case. The video footage of K9 Duke during Sarah Mitchell's traffic stop, Duke's training records, and his deployment history over the past 18 months. Do you have an opinion about Duke's reliability as a drug detection dog?" Shaw stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Dr. Kim never personally observed Duke or evaluated him directly." "Your Honor," Linda countered, "Dr. Kim is an expert in canine behavior. Experts routinely form opinions based on review of records and video evidence. That's the nature of expert testimony." "Overruled. Dr. Kim may answer." Dr. Kim adjusted her glasses and turned slightly toward the jury, a professor addressing a classroom. "Based on my review of the evidence, I have serious concerns about Duke's reliability. Specifically, Duke's alert pattern is consistent with what we call handler cueing, rather than genuine scent detection." "Can you explain to the jury what handler cueing means?" "Of course." Dr. Kim's tone became more animated, engaged. "Dogs, particularly working dogs, are extraordinarily attuned to their handlers. They read body language, facial expressions, breathing patterns, and subtle physical cues that humans often don't even realize they're giving. In the context of drug detection, handler cueing occurs when a dog alerts not because they've detected drug odor, but because they've detected their handler's expectation or desire for them to alert." Sarah watched the jury. They were listening intently, several taking notes. "Dogs want to please their handlers," Dr. Kim continued. "That's hardwired into their psychology through thousands of years of domestication and reinforced through training. When a handler unconsciously signals that they expect to find drugs, perhaps through tension in their posture, a change in their breathing, or the way they grip the leash, the dog picks up on these cues and responds accordingly. The dog alerts because that's what the handler wants, not because drugs are present." Linda played the traffic stop video on the courtroom screen, the footage now familiar to everyone present. "Dr. Kim, I'd like you to walk the jury through what you observed in this video. Please focus on Officer Brennan's behavior as he approaches the vehicle with Duke." Dr. Kim stood and moved closer to the screen, using a laser pointer Linda provided. "Watch closely at the 2:34 mark as Officer Brennan approaches the trunk area. See here," she highlighted Brennan's posture. "His shoulders tense, his stride shortens, and his grip on the leash tightens significantly. These are subtle but clear signals of anticipation or expectation. The video continued frame by frame. Now at 2:38, watch Duke's behavior. He's not exhibiting the intense, focused sniffing pattern we'd expect if he'd actually detected drug odor. Instead, his attention keeps flicking back to Officer Brennan. See the ear position, the quick glances. Duke is monitoring his handler more than he's investigating the scent picture. And when Duke alerts, when he sits at 2:41. Watch Brennan's body language immediately before the alert. His weight shifts forward, the leash pressure changes slightly, and there's a minute movement of his hand. These could all be unconscious signals, but Duke reads them clearly. The sit comes less than 2 seconds after these cues. That's consistent with handler cueing, not independent scent detection. Linda returned to her position. Dr. Kim, you also reviewed Duke's deployment history, 47 alerts over 18 months, with only 9 resulting in actual drug discoveries. What does that success rate tell you? Dr. Kim's expression grew more serious. That 19% accuracy rate is, frankly, troubling. The national standard for certified drug detection dogs is 60–70% accuracy, minimum. Elite dogs achieve 80–85%. Duke's performance is worse than random chance would predict. It's actually worse than if Officer Brennan had simply flipped a coin to decide whether to search a vehicle. A ripple went through the courtroom. Sarah saw several jurors exchange glances. Can you explain how a dog's accuracy could be worse than chance? Suggests systematic bias rather than random error. If Duke were simply a poorly trained dog making random mistakes, his accuracy would hover around 50%, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. But at 19%, Duke is consistently alerting in situations where drugs aren't present. That pattern strongly indicates handler cueing. Officer Brennan is unconsciously directing Duke to alert on vehicles Brennan's suspects might contain drugs, regardless of whether they actually do. Shaw was on his feet. Objection. Dr. Kim is speculating about Officer Brennan's motives and state of mind. Sustained. Dr. Kim, please confine your testimony to the dog's behavior. Dr. Kim nodded. The pattern of false alerts, combined with the body language cues visible in the video, indicates Duke is responding to his handler's signals rather than independently detecting drug odor. This is a well-documented phenomenon in K9 detection work. Linda pulled up a new document on the screen, a research study. Dr. Kim, you co-authored a study in 2018 about handler influence on detection dogs. Can you summarize your findings? We conducted a controlled experiment with 18 certified drug detection dogs and their handlers. The dogs were brought into rooms where handlers were told drugs might be hidden. In reality, no drugs were present, but we placed visual markers, strips of red tape in certain locations. The markers meant nothing, but handlers unconsciously focused on them. Remarkably, the dogs alerted at the marked locations 85% of the time, even though no drugs were present. The dogs were responding to where their handlers expected to find drugs, not to actual drug scent. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of pen on paper, as jurors wrote furiously. What about this morning's demonstration? Linda asked. Duke failed to alert to actual marijuana but did alert to legal CBD oil. How do you interpret that? It reinforces everything I've testified to. First, Duke's failure to detect the marijuana suggests either poor training or overwhelming reliance on handler cues. Without Officer Brennan directing him to a specific target, Duke couldn't identify the actual contraband. Second, the alert to CBD oil demonstrates that Duke, like many detection dogs, cannot distinguish between legal and illegal substances. CBD and THC have similar scent profiles. But more importantly, the way Duke approached the jury box, the insistent pulling toward that specific location despite his handler's attempts to redirect, that suggests Duke was following his nose to any cannabis-related scent, not specifically trained to differentiate. In your professional opinion, was Duke's alert on August 17, 2019, reliable evidence that drugs were present in Sarah Mitchell's vehicle? Dr. Kim turned to face the jury directly. No. Given Duke's poor track record, the handler cueing visible in the video, and his demonstrated inability to reliably detect drugs even under controlled conditions, I cannot conclude his alert was reliable. Duke's alert tells us only that Officer Brennan expected to find drugs. It tells us nothing about whether drugs were actually present or whether the driver had knowledge of them. Linda smiled. Thank you, Dr. Kim, no further questions. Shaw approached for cross-examination, his expression hard. Dr. Kim, you've never worked as a police officer, have you? No. Never trained a police dog. I've consulted on training programs, but I'm not a dog trainer. I'm a scientist who studies canine behavior. So you sit in your ivory tower at the university, publishing papers, while officers like Tom Brennan are out on the streets every day, actually using these dogs to find drugs and make communities safer. Dr. Kim didn't flinch. My research is specifically designed to help improve K-9 programs and make them more reliable. Identifying problems like handler cueing ultimately serves law enforcement by ensuring searches are based on valid alerts. Shaw shifted tactics. Duke is certified by a nationally recognized training program, correct? According to his records, yes. And certification programs have standards, testing requirements. They do, though those standards vary widely and don't always account for real-world performance versus training environment performance. Shaw held up Duke's certification papers. But you're not questioning Duke's training, are you? You're questioning Officer Brennan. I'm questioning the reliability of Duke's alerts when influenced by handler cueing, which you claim is Officer Brennan's fault. Dr. Kim remained calm. Handler cueing is often unconscious. Officer Brennan may not even realize he's doing it. That doesn't make the alerts any more reliable. Shaw's cross-examination continued for another 20 minutes, but he couldn't shake Dr. Kim's core testimony. When he finally sat down, looking frustrated, Linda had no redirect. Dr. Kim's testimony stood on its own. As the expert witness stepped down, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months, genuine hope. The jury had seen Duke fail. They'd heard an expert explain why. The prosecution's case was crumbling. But the trial wasn't over yet. The fifth day of trial opened with an electricity in the air, a sense that something fundamental had shifted. The prosecution's case, which had seemed so solid just days before, now felt fragile. Shaw looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights spent trying to salvage his case. The jury filed in with expressions ranging from thoughtful to openly skeptical. Judge Morrison settled into her chair. Ms. Chen, your next witness. Linda stood, her voice steady and clear. The defense calls Sarah Mitchell to the stand. Sarah's legs trembled as she rose from the defense table. This was the moment they'd prepared for, rehearsed over and over in the jail's consultation room. But no amount of preparation could calm the terror flooding through her veins. Her entire life, her freedom, her future with Emma, everything, depended on the next hour. The bailiff administered the oath. Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper. I do. As she settled into the witness chair, Sarah's eyes found her mother in the gallery. Patricia's lips were moving in silent prayer, her hands clasped so tightly they'd gone white. Next to her, Jennifer offered an encouraging nod. Linda approached with a gentle expression, the way you might approach a frightened animal. Sarah, I know this is difficult. Just tell the jury the truth about what happened on August 17, 2019. Start with that morning. Sarah took a shaky breath. I woke up around 7. My daughter Emma was with my mom for the week's summer visitation. I had to work a double shift at the warehouse and my car wouldn't start, again. It had been having transmission problems for months and that morning it just died. Her voice steadied as she fell into the familiar story. I called my supervisor, explained I'd be late. I was panicking because I'd already been late twice that month and I couldn't afford to lose my job. What happened next? I was in the break room around 10, upset, trying to figure out how to afford a repair when Marcus came in. Marcus Webb. We worked together, not close friends, but friendly. We'd eat lunch together sometimes, talk about TV shows, normal coworker stuff. Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. He heard me on the phone with the mechanic and asked what was wrong. I told him about my car. He said his cousin was visiting Memphis that weekend and he didn't need his Honda. He offered to let me borrow it. How did you respond? I was so grateful, so relieved. I thanked him probably 10 times. He laughed it off, said friends help friends. He gave me his keys right there in the break room and said to bring it back Sunday. That was it. Simple. Linda paced slowly, letting the jury absorb this. Did Marcus say anything else about the car? Any warnings or instructions? Just where he parked it, and Sarah paused, her brow furrowing as she remembered. He seemed nervous, anxious. He kept checking his phone, looking toward the warehouse entrance like he was expecting someone. I asked if he was okay, and he said he was fine, just waiting on a call. When did you next see Marcus? Sarah's voice dropped. I haven't, not until. She trailed off, her eyes widening as the courtroom doors suddenly opened. Everyone turned. 2 U.S. Marshals entered, escorting a man in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. Marcus Webb looked different than Sarah remembered, thinner, with a scraggly beard and haunted eyes. But it was unmistakably him. The man who'd smiled at her in the warehouse break room. The man who'd destroyed her life. Sarah felt fury and betrayal collide in her chest, hot and suffocating. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Ms. Mitchell, sit down. But Sarah wasn't looking at Marcus. Her eyes had locked onto something else entirely, Duke, the German shepherd, who'd been lying near the bailiff station throughout the trial. The dog's presence had become almost background noise, but now Sarah stared at him with sudden, crystalline clarity. A memory flashed through her mind. Marcus in the warehouse parking lot 2 months before the arrest, backing away from an employee's dog, his face pale with fear. Another memory. Marcus refusing to take a shortcut through a park because too many people walk their dogs there. Another. Marcus explaining during lunch why he'd never have a pet, his voice tight as he mentioned a childhood attack. Show him, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the courtroom murmur like a blade. The room fell silent, every eye turned to her. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Mitchell, what did you say? Sarah pointed at Duke, then at Marcus, her hand shaking but her voice growing stronger. Show him the dog. Bring Duke close to him. Do it now. Marcus's face had gone ashen, his eyes widening in recognition of what Sarah had realized. He started shaking his head violently. No, no, keep that thing away from me. Judge Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to sharp interest. Ms. Chen, what is your client suggesting? Linda was already on her feet, her mind racing to catch up with Sarah's revelation. Your Honor, I request a brief recess to confer with my client. No, Sarah interrupted, her eyes still locked on Marcus. No recess. Marcus is terrified of dogs. He was attacked when he was 7 years old. He told me about it once. He has scars on his arm. He won't go near any dog, won't even walk past them on the street. The implications hung in the air, but Shaw was quicker than Linda expected. He shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is completely irrelevant. It's completely relevant, Linda's voice rang out. If Marcus Webb was using that vehicle to transport drugs, he would have ensured no K9 unit could detect any scent traces. A person with a severe dog phobia wouldn't use a vehicle that retained any canine scent markers. Officer Brennan, do you transport Duke in your patrol car? Brennan, sitting in the gallery, nodded slowly. Yes, he rides with me. And does Duke's scent remain in vehicles he's been in? Objection, Shaw was red-faced now. This is pure speculation. Judge Morrison held up her hand. I want to see this. Bailiff, bring K9 Duke to the witness stand area. Marshals, bring Mr. Webb closer. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters were frantically typing. Shaw was arguing loudly with his team, but Judge Morrison's gavel brought order. As the bailiff approached with Duke on a leash, Marcus began struggling against his shackles. "No, get it away, please." His voice rose to a panicked shout. I can't be near dogs, please." Duke was still 15 feet away, but Marcus was hyperventilating, pressing himself back against the marshals, his entire body trembling. The reaction was visceral, undeniable, the terror of someone with a genuine, deep-seated phobia. "That's enough," Judge Morrison ordered. "Remove Mr. Webb from the courtroom, and someone get him water." As the marshals escorted a shaking Marcus out, Sarah remained standing, her revelation still settling over the courtroom like fallout. Linda grabbed her legal pad, her mind working furiously. "Your Honor," Linda said, her voice urgent, "I request an immediate recess to investigate this new information. If Marcus Webb has a documented dog phobia, it completely changes the context of this case. A person with that level of fear wouldn't use a vehicle that had any canine presence. He would have taken steps to eliminate any dog scent," Morrison finished, her sharp mind already following the thread. Which might explain why Duke alerted, not to drugs, but to scent-masking chemicals or cleaning agents designed to hide drug odor from K9 units. Shaw slumped in his chair, the fight visibly draining from him. He knew what was coming. Judge Morrison's expression was grave. "We're in recess until tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Ms. Chen, I suggest you use this time wisely. Mr. Shaw, I suggest you do the same. And someone get Mr. Webb to a holding cell and find out if he's willing to answer questions." As the jury filed out, several were staring at Sarah with something approaching awe. The woman at the defense table, the accused drug trafficker, had just cracked her own case wide open. With 2 words, "Show him." Linda gripped Sarah's shoulder as they sat back down. "How did you remember? About Marcus and dogs?" Sarah's voice was barely audible, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. I saw him and I saw Duke, and suddenly I remembered everything. Every time he avoided dogs, every excuse he made. He was so careful about it." She looked at Linda, hope and terror mingling in her eyes. "Does this help? Does this prove?" "It helps," Linda said firmly. "It helps a lot. Now we just need to prove Marcus had the car professionally cleaned to hide the drugs from K9 detection. If we can do that, we've shown reasonable doubt, maybe more than that." Through the courtroom windows, the afternoon sun cast long shadows. Sarah looked at her hands, still shaking from adrenaline. 2 words had changed everything. Now they just had to finish what those words had started. The emergency recess extended through the night and into the next morning. Linda Chen hadn't slept. She'd spent every moment since Sarah's revelation making frantic phone calls, tracking down leads, following the thread that had suddenly unraveled the prosecution's entire case. At 6:47 a.m., exhausted but energized, Linda sat across from Marcus Webb in a federal holding cell. His attorney, a weary-looking public defender named Thomas Green, sat beside him. Marcus looked broken, his hands trembling on the metal table. "Tell her," Green said quietly. "You're facing federal trafficking charges now, Marcus. Cooperation is your only option." Marcus's voice was hoarse. "I'm scared of dogs, have been since I was 7. Neighbor's pit bull." He touched his left forearm unconsciously, where Linda could see the edge of scarring beneath his sleeve. "I got bit bad, 23 stitches. I can't be around them, can't even look at pictures without feeling sick." "And the Honda," Linda pressed. Marcus closed his eyes. "I'd been running drugs for my supplier for 8 months, small amounts at first, then bigger loads. The Honda was my transport vehicle, but I knew the cops were using K9s on I-40, everybody knew. My supplier was paranoid about it." He took a shaky breath. 2 days before I gave Sarah the car, I took it to Elite Auto Detail on Nolensville Pike. Cost me $400. They did a full scent elimination treatment, some chemical process that removes organic odors. The guy said it was popular with people who have allergies. It would hide any trace that drugs had been in there. Linda's heart raced. You have a receipt. Paid cash, but they should have records. I used my real name. I didn't think. His voice cracked. I didn't think about any of this. I just needed someone clean to move the drugs. Sarah was perfect. Nice, trustworthy, no record, she'd never suspect. When did you put the drugs in the trunk? That morning after I gave her the keys. I went out during my break and put the duffel bag in. She never checked the trunk. Why would she? She trusted me. Shame colored his voice. When I heard she got arrested, I panicked. I cleared out my apartment that night, disconnected my phone, ran to my cousin's place in Mississippi. I thought I could hide, start over, but they found me anyway. Linda pulled out a recording device. Will you testify to this, in court? Marcus looked at his attorney, who nodded. With the cooperation agreement in place, yes, I'll testify. At 9:15 a.m., Judge Morrison's courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about Sarah's dramatic revelation, and media from across Tennessee had descended on the courthouse. Sarah sat at the defense table, her mother clutching her hand through the railing behind her. Linda stood. Your Honor, the defense has new evidence that fundamentally changes this case. We've obtained records from Elite Auto Detail showing that Marcus Webb had the Honda Accord treated with industrial scent elimination chemicals on August 15, 2019, 2 days before Sarah Mitchell was arrested. We also have Mr. Webb's sworn statement and his agreement to testify. Shaw looked like a man at a funeral, his funeral. Your Honor, the prosecution has reviewed this new evidence. We've also spoken with Mr. Webb. Given these developments, he paused, the words clearly painful, the state can no longer prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Mitchell had knowledge of the drugs in the vehicle. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Order. But Morrison's expression had softened as she looked at Sarah. Ms. Chen, do you wish to present Mr. Webb's testimony? Yes, Your Honor. Marcus was brought in, looking small and defeated in his orange jumpsuit. He wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes as he took the stand. Under Linda's questioning, he recounted everything: the drug operation, his deliberate selection of Sarah as an unwitting courier, the scent elimination treatment, placing the drugs in the trunk while Sarah was working. Why Sarah? Linda asked. Marcus finally looked at her, tears streaming down his face. Because she was good, clean, the kind of person cops wouldn't suspect. I used her kindness against her. I'm sorry. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Sarah sat rigid, refusing to cry, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She'd save her tears for later, for Emma, for the life she was about to get back. Shaw's cross-examination was perfunctory. There was nothing to attack. Marcus was confessing, accepting responsibility. When he finished, Judge Morrison turned to the jury. Members of the jury, given the testimony you've just heard and the new evidence presented, I'm going to give you modified instructions. You must now determine whether the prosecution has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Mitchell knowingly possessed and intended to transport the drugs found in the vehicle. Consider Mr. Webb's testimony, the scent elimination evidence, and everything you've heard about K9 Duke's reliability. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 12 minutes. Sarah spent every second of those 3 hours in a small conference room, unable to eat, unable to think, her mother praying beside her while Linda paced like a caged animal. When the bailiff finally called them back, Sarah's legs barely carried her into the courtroom. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreperson, an older black woman who'd been taking copious notes throughout the trial, stood with the verdict form. In the matter of the state of Tennessee versus Sarah Jean Mitchell, on the charge of drug trafficking, How do you find? The foreperson looked directly at Sarah, and for the first time in 5 months, Sarah saw compassion in a stranger's eyes. Not guilty. Sarah collapsed, not gracefully, not dramatically, but completely. Her legs simply gave out. Linda caught her, holding her up as the courtroom exploded with noise. Patricia Mitchell was sobbing. Jennifer was screaming with joy. Reporters were shouting questions. Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. Ms. Mitchell, you are free to go. This court is adjourned. She paused, looking at Officer Brennan in the gallery. I'm also ordering a formal review of the K-9 program in Davidson County. Officer Brennan, Duke is suspended from active duty pending retraining and evaluation. Sarah barely registered the words. She was free. Free. Linda was pulling her up, and then her mother's arms were around her, and she was crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine poured down like a blessing. News cameras surrounded them, but Linda held up a hand. Ms. Mitchell will not be making a statement. She's going home to her daughter. Sarah looked back at the courthouse one last time. Through the window, she could see Duke being led out by Brennan, the dog's tail low, confused about why his routine had changed. She felt no anger toward the animal. Duke was just a dog, doing what he'd been trained to do, responding to his handler's cues. But those 2 words, show him, had exposed the truth. Marcus's phobia, the scent elimination, the systematic problems with K-9 alerts that had sent who knows how many innocent people to prison. 3 months later, Sarah stood in her small apartment, watching Emma sleep. The Tennessee legislature had passed new K-9 standards requiring regular accuracy audits. Duke had been retired to a family home where he could just be a pet. Officer Brennan faced departmental review but no criminal charges. Handler cueing, experts said, was often unconscious. Marcus Webb pleaded guilty to federal trafficking charges and received 15 years, the sentence Sarah would have served. Sarah's lawsuit against the county was settled for $400,000, enough to fix her car, get a better apartment, start a college fund for Emma. But the money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was Emma's hand in hers, the job she'd gotten at a law firm inspired by Linda's work, the second chance she'd fought for with 2 simple words. Show him. 2 words that had changed everything. 2 words that had saved her life.